Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Banks. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be looking at some more articles today for our news roundup. We're going to be looking at some articles by Al Jazeera this time around. And I have two articles for you today. The first article that I have for you today that is titled, Israeli Forces Storm Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital. And this was posted today, the 18th of March, updated 2 hours ago. Israel's military forces have stormed Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City with tanks and heavy gunfire, resulting in deaths and injuries, Palestinian officials have said. The Israeli military said in a statement on Monday that it is conducting a precise operation at the medical facility. Gaza's Ministry of Health said about 30,000 people, including displaced civilians, wounded patients, and medical staff, are trapped inside the complex. Israel, which wound down many of its operations in northern Gaza some weeks ago, claiming to have destroyed Hamas's military infrastructure, said in a statement that Hamas, which governs the enclave, has regrouped inside Al-Shifa and is using it to command attacks against Israel. In a message in English on Telegram, Gaza's Ministry of Health said anyone who tries to move is targeted by sniper bullets and quadcopter. It said that the raid, which began at 2 a.m., has resulted in a number of martyrs and wounded. Al Jazeera Arabic reported that the hospital's surgical building was on fire following the Israeli bombing. According to Palestinian writer and journalist Imad Zakaut and other witnesses, Israeli forces arrested Al Jazeera Arabic's correspondent Ismail Al-Ghul from inside the hospital. The witnesses said Al-Ghul was beaten severely by Israeli soldiers before he was arrested with dozens of men and women within the hospital. Abdel Hadi Sayed, who had been sheltering in the medical facility for over 3 months, told the Associated Press that people are trapped inside. They fire at anything moving. Doctors and ambulances can't move, he said. Later on Monday, the Israeli military announced one of its soldiers died in its raid on the hospital, where it exchanged fire with Hamas fighters. The death of the soldier, 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Matan Vinogradov, brings the total number of Israeli soldiers killed in the Gaza war to 250, according to them. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari said in a video posted earlier on X that the Israeli military would be conducting a humanitarian effort during the assault, providing food and water. He also insisted that there is no obligation for patients and medical staff to evacuate the hospital. Now, that just doesn't make any sense to me. How do you conduct a humanitarian effort while also bombing the same location that you're trying to do a humanitarian effort in? How do you do a humanitarian when you're doing a genocide at the same time? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's clearly on the face of it contradictory. However, Al Jazeera Arabic correspondents on the ground reported that Israeli forces used loudspeakers to order hundreds of people sheltering at the hospital to evacuate. Footage verified by Al Jazeera's Sanad verification unit shows dozens of Palestinians fleeing the hospital as Israeli forces launched operations in the area. And I'll show that clip here. Translation. The Israeli army forces hundreds of families to flee Al-Shifa Hospital west of Gaza City. Later on Monday, Israel's military issued a call for all civilians near Al-Shifa or in the broader Ramal neighborhood of Gaza City to flee south. Leaflets dropped by the Israeli army instructed people to evacuate to the Al-Mawasi evacuation zone located in western Khan Yunis, contradicting Hagari's earlier statements, leaving a misleading narrative, Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud said during a report from Rafah. Palestinian journalist Wadia Abu al-Saud, trapped inside the medical complex, described the situation in the facility as catastrophic and reported intense clashes in a video posted to Instagram. This might be my last video, he said. We're now besieged inside Al-Shifa Hospital. We're being heavily shot at. The occupation suddenly raided the hospital and its vicinity. As you can hear now, there are intense clashes in the vicinity of Al-Shifa Hospital. We're hearing sounds coming from the gate. There is shrapnel falling over the hospital's yard. That is utterly terrifying. Al Jazeera's Willem Marks, in occupied East Jerusalem, quoted an Israeli statement saying its forces encountered fire inside the hospital, responded with live fire, and individuals were hit. Marks noted that this is the fourth Israeli raid on Al-Shifa since October 7. A long siege of the facility in November earned Israel an international outcry. The government media office in Gaza condemned the operation, calling the attack a war crime, which is exactly what it is. The Israeli occupation is still using its fabricated narrative to deceive the world and justify the storming of Al-Shifa, it said in a statement. The health ministry said it has received calls from people in the area around the hospital claiming there were dozens of casualties. No one could transport them to the hospital due to the intensity of gunfire and artillery shelling, the ministry said. According to the UN, 155 health facilities in the Gaza Strip have been damaged since the war began. 155 health facilities in the Gaza Strip have been damaged since the war began. And just this last couple videos that we talked about, they were directly targeting aid facilities and UN health distribution centers. Israel is straight up trying to keep people from surviving, and that is the last bit of our article there. And it is literally horrifying. I will be posting all of these articles in my description of the video, so you can go and read these and read more from these sources here. I highly encourage it. It's very important to stay informed on what is going on, especially since I can't do anything. I'm just what can I do? I'm making videos on YouTube, screaming into the void at my own personal outcry over this horrifying war going on, this genocide. I will also be linking humanitarian aid groups and places where you can donate in the description as well. If you haven't seen Sean, his video on Palestine, just called Palestine, I would recommend going and watching that as well. It's very thoroughly well written and researched and all that. So go give that a look. The second article that I have today that we're going to be looking at by Al Jazeera is "The West is Giving Israel Weapons While Discussing Delivering Aid to Gaza" by Simon Speakman-Cordall on the 18th of March, 2024, today. As lawmakers across much of the West debate the extent to which Israel may be hampering the passage of life-saving aid into Gaza, the weapons exports that underpin much of Israel's war on the besieged enclave continue to flow. Since the war began, the volume of weapons entering Israel has increased as huge volumes of ordnances are used to flatten areas of Gaza as well as kill, maim, and displace its civilian population. On the one hand, we have this dire humanitarian need. On the other hand, we have this continual supply of weapons to the country Israel, which is creating that need. Akshaya Kumar, the director of crisis advocacy at Human Rights Watch, said. Next section, international law. When it comes to arming another country, international law has rules and conventions to control who arms whom and what the weapons are used for. Under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which the International Court of Justice, ICJ, ruled in January, may plausibly be underway in Gaza. States are legally bound to prevent genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Yet this is exactly the crimes that they are perpetrating. The United States declined to sign this convention until 1988. And that's because the United States was covertly committing genocide in many other countries all the way up until that point. Under the terms of the internationally binding arms trade treaty, to which the U.S. is not a signatory, a country is prohibited from exporting weapons to any state it suspects might use them for genocide, crimes against humanity, attacks directed against civilian objects, or civilians protected as such. More than 31,000 Palestinians have died due to Israel's war on Gaza so far, and my own editorializing, my own personal opinion here, that number is way too low. that number is probably months inaccurate now at this point. But we don't know. We don't know how many people are actually dead in Gaza because it's been sitting there at that number for a while now. And I'm sure that it's been getting worse and worse and worse. More than 31,000 Palestinians have died due to Israel's war on Gaza so far, mostly women and children. And according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza, some 73,000 have been injured as well. Health facilities, also under attack and siege, ceased being able to deal with the wounded and the dying months ago. The enclave is teetering on the brink of humanitarian catastrophe. The European Union's chief diplomat, Josep Borrell, told the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday that Israel is using hunger as a weapon of war and manufacturing disaster by stopping aid from entering. There are literally people who are standing blocking aid trucks from going into Gaza. Israel has also shot at people gathering to get what little aid is allowed in. While Western states have recently been going to great lengths to have Israel recognize its role in creating the suffering we're seeing in Gaza, HRW's Kumar said, "We're not seeing any corresponding reduction in the flow of weapons from states such as the US, Germany, and beyond." Israel's principal arms suppliers have focused on getting aid into Gaza to reach the Palestinians being attacked with many of the weapons they sold to Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden used his State of the Union address this year to announce the creation of a maritime corridor by which he claims it would be possible to bypass Israel and deliver aid to Gaza. Reality on the ground. While some countries have suspended arms exports to Israel in light of its war on Gaza, some significant suppliers remain. The U.S.'s annual contribution of about $3.8 billion to Israel's military budget has continued, on top of which is a further $14 billion for Israel the U.S. approved in February, reportedly with an eye to preparing Israel for a multi-front war, which many read as opening another front against the armed group Hezbollah in Lebanon. And if you have been paying attention to what's been going on there, they've been killing people in Lebanon, striking hundreds of miles away from the border, deep into Lebanon. According to the Stockholm Institute for Peace, the U.S. provides 69% of Israel's arms imports, but recent confidential briefings to the U.S. Congress reported on by the Washington Post suggest this may not be the full picture. A legal loophole in the U.S. Arms Export Control Act, which governs the export and end use of weapons shipped from the U.S., means only packages of a certain value need congressional oversight, meaning bundled packages below that value are being slipped through regularly. So far, it was reported about 100 arms shipments have taken place without any public record, causing an uproar among civil society groups. With under-threshold sales and arms transfers, we have little insight into what munitions are being shipped. It's a black hole. Ari Tolani, the director of the Security Assistance Monitor at the U.S.-based Center for International Policy, said. Similarly, while the Israeli government claims that they can assure Biden these arms are used in compliance with IHL, international humanitarian law, evidence from Gaza shows that's not the case. The U.S. maintains it is acting within the provisions of the law. Germany's arms exports to Israel have increased too, with Berlin shipping some $350 million worth of weaponry, a tenfold increase on 2022 exports, most of which was approved after the Hamas attack on Israel. Other countries, such as Australia, Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, were all named in the UN report in February as maintaining their supplies. In response to a query by Al Jazeera as to the responsibility attached to arming Israel as it devastates Gaza, a U.S. State Department spokesperson wrote that there has been no determination that Israel has committed genocide, including in the ICJ. And that's just complete horror. In recent weeks, the UK and others are understood to have adopted a similar position over the well-reported and mounting humanitarian crisis in Gaza, maintaining business as usual while expressing concern that the weapons they continue to supply may be used in an impending assault on Rafah, where 1.4 million civilians are sheltered. Now, how big is Rafah? Let's look at this really quick. Rafah, the city of Rafah, is 24.7 square miles. And they fit 1.4 million civilians into that tiny area. That is utterly horrifying. Pushing back. However, while many countries in the West continue to provide Israel with weapons, other former exports appear alive to the legal hazards of licensing weapons to a state the ICJ has found may plausibly be committing genocide. Plausibly. Yeah, they just are. They just straight up are. In addition to the Antwerp police being condemned by Belgium's Labour Party for its decision to import anti-riot weapons from Israel, there are wider, long-standing bans on weapons sales to Israel. Shortly after the assault on Gaza began in October, Italy and Spain halted arms shipments to Israel, though the latter continues to provide ammunition for display. Belgium's Walloon regional government, as well as the Japanese Itochu Corporation, have also announced that they are halting arms exports. In February, a judge in the Netherlands upheld a ruling blocking the export of F-35 parts to Israel, saying it is undeniable that there is a clear risk the exported F-35 parts are used in serious violations of international humanitarian law. The UN has already warned of the legal hazards of exporting weapons to Israel in its experts report, unambiguously titled, "Arms Exports to Israel Must Stop Immediately." That's really, really telling. The UN is saying that. Meanwhile, they're also trying to mount up nuclear war with Russia, but, whatever. The UK is facing legal pressure to reverse its position on weapons exports to Israel while in the US. The Center for Constitutional Rights, CCR, NGO, is appealing its case against the President, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Defense for the continued export of weapons to a state potentially engaging in genocide. The initial court in Oakland, California, ruled that the supply of weapons to Israel was ultimately a political question. Astha Sharma Pokharel, a staff attorney for CCR, told Al Jazeera. However, while the judge conceded that the area was beyond his jurisdiction, he did call upon the executive to reconsider its unflagging support for Israel's attacks on Palestinians, which is incredibly unusual. Is that unusual? I don't know. The documented abuses. That Israel may have used weapons provided by the West to kill and maim more than 100,000 people, as well as contribute to the hardship of countless more, is a growing conclusion in reports by observers, aid organizations, and analysts, and also just normal young people on social media. We're at the point now where there's people in Palestine who have followed me on Instagram who are posting their videos and showing the destruction there, showing what's going on before the news can even catch up to it. And it's basically leading us all into a point where we're all starting to be able to identify the propaganda, In the early weeks of January, the premises of the International Rescue Committee and the Medical Aid for Palestine NGO in one of the safe zones designated by Israeli military in Gaza were struck by an Israeli jet. Yeah, it's a real safe zone, isn't it? Subsequent investigations revealed the strike to have involved a smart bomb, quote unquote, fired from an F-16 fighter, both manufactured in the U.S., with parts for the latter from the UK. A statement by the two organizations this week said their attempts to understand what happened in January elicited 6 different versions of events from the Israeli army, and no undertaking from the US and UK that they were holding Israel to account for its use of their weapons in breach of the arms trade treaty ratified by the UK in 2014. Previous reports have documented Israeli abuse of the language of humanitarian protection to crowd people into smaller and smaller areas purported to be safe and then launch attacks on those same people. The war on Gaza shows no signs of abating. Currently, Israel is speaking of creating humanitarian islands in the center of Gaza ahead of a land assault on Rafah it had been threatening for weeks. And I think that if they did make those humanitarian islands, whatever they are, they're going to bomb them as soon as they get everyone on them. Because once you get everyone in one place, you just drop one bomb and they're all dead. In the meantime, sheltering within the city and across Gaza, millions wait. And that's the end of our perspective there. It's really heavy. This is really heavy stuff. if you enjoy what I do and you also care very much about all this sort of stuff, please consider subscribing. Consider leaving a like. It helps me. It helps me have more of a motivation to keep doing this. And this is something that I really am very passionate about. It's pretty interesting seeing the fluctuations in my subscriber count since I started doing this. And it's been kind of like hovering around like maybe 257 or 256 or whatever last time I checked. Um, and you know, I'm okay with alienating half my audience. If people are gonna see this and then have a knee jerk reaction and call me a dirty socialist or whatever, so be it. Bring it on. The most important thing that I'm trying to get across here is that these videos that I'm making, where I'm doing these news roundups, these are articles that like my family and my friends aren't reading, and so I'm able to present this to an audience. And it's starting to rain now, so I probably should stop recording. But yeah, if you guys like what I do, do the thing, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.